The fluorescent hum of the lab lights usually soothed me, a constant, low thrum against the late-night silence. Tonight, it felt like a growing migraine behind my eyes. I leaned closer to the microscope, my breath fogging the eyepiece for a second before I forced myself to hold it. Dr. Eris Thorne, mycologist, spending another Friday night chasing shadows in the microbial world. My wife, Ilara, would be home, probably watching some terrible rom-com, a glass of wine in hand, wondering why her husband found mutated fungi more appealing. She usually just smiled and said, "It's your passion, Eris." But tonight, something was different. The sample under the lens wasn't just different, it was alien. I'd received it anonymously, a vial of black viscous fluid from a deep-sea drilling expedition, labeled simply Abyssal Bloom. It looked like a fungal spore mass, but it was behaving in ways no fungus should. It pulsed. A slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction, like a tiny black heart. And the tendrils. Microscopic filaments were stretching, retracting, feeling the air within the petri dish. They looked almost purposeful. Not like hyphae growing towards nutrients, but like sensory organs. On the small, dust-caked TV mounted in the corner, a local news anchor was droning about a sudden, inexplicable surge in violent crime. "Reports are coming in from multiple districts," she said, her smile too fixed, too wide. "Authorities are urging residents to remain calm and stay indoors." Normal Friday night news boilerplate, usually ignored. But then a flash. A grainy cell phone video cut across the screen. A man on a street corner, his movements jerky, unnatural. His arm. It looked too long, distorted. A dark, worm-like growth writhing under his skin, pushing outwards. My heart skipped a beat. No, that couldn't be right. The video cut back to the anchor, her smile finally faltering, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. The tendrils in my petri dish pulsed faster, almost in sync with my racing pulse. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound started outside the lab door, like fingernails dragging across painted metal. I froze, my hand hovering over the microscope. Impossible. The lab was locked, 5 floors up, in a quiet wing of the university building. "We're receiving unconfirmed reports," the anchor stammered, "of what appears to be organic growths on some of the aggressors. Citizens are advised to—" A high-pitched shriek ripped through the night outside, cutting her off. It was raw, animalistic, and ended abruptly with a sickening, wet tearing sound. My stomach lurched. The lights in the lab flickered violently, then settled into a dimmer, more unstable glow. The humming sound intensified, a high whine now, like overloaded electronics. Under the microscope, one of the tendrils from the abyssal bloom had detached itself from the main mass. It was stretching, reaching, not randomly, but as if seeking something specific within the confined space of the dish. It was black, almost iridescent, and ended in a razor-fine tip. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my gut. This wasn't just a new species. This was something else entirely. A new form of life evolving at an impossible rate. This was the moment. The very first moment I, Eris Thorne, a simple mycologist, truly understood the terrifying meaning of the phrase, "the day humanity witnessed tentacle evolution." And it was just beginning. The scratching at the lab door intensified, no longer tentative, but frantic, desperate. Not fingernails anymore, but something harder, thicker, scraping against the metal. A deep, guttural moan echoed from the hallway outside, a sound that twisted my insides. It was too close, much too close. I stood rigid, my eyes glued to the door, the small circular window set into its upper panel. Behind me, the microscopic tendril in the petri dish had reached the edge of its glass prison, tapping, tapping, tapping against the curved surface with a sound so faint it was barely perceptible, yet screamed louder than any alarm. The news report had dissolved into chaos, static on the screen. Then a different feed, live from a helicopter, shaky and terrifying. I saw it then. Below, the streets of the city were no longer just congested, they were choked with absolute bedlam. Fires raged in the distance, painting the sky in an angry orange glow. And the people, not just running, but scattering from things. Things that moved with a sickening, lurching gait. And then I saw them, clearly this time, even from the helicopter's height. Protrusions, dark, whip-like appendages bursting from shoulders, backs, even faces. They writhed, snatching at fleeing figures, dragging them down into the churning mass below. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just violent crime. This was a biological nightmare. This was the tentacle evolution I had just seen hinted at under my lens, now writ large on the canvas of a dying city. A tremendous crash erupted from the hallway, followed by a splintering sound. The lab door buckled inward at the top, a crack snaking across the paint. Whatever was out there was strong, far stronger than any human. My mind, usually a fortress of scientific reasoning, was crumbling. This wasn't just an outbreak. This was an extinction event unfolding in real time. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding action. My gaze darted around the lab. Equipment, chemicals, specimens. Weapons? No. I was a mycologist, not a combat specialist. My hands trembled as I grabbed a heavy metal retort stand, the closest thing to a blunt instrument. It felt ridiculously inadequate. Another impact. The door groaned again, its frame visibly warping. A shadow flickered across the small window. Then a face. It was Professor Albright, head of the biology department, a man I'd shared countless coffees with, debated phylogenetic trees. But this wasn't Albright. His skin was gray, his eyes milky white and wide with a horrifying, unseeing hunger. And from his left eye socket, where an eye should have been, a thick black tendril pulsed, coiling like a grotesque worm, twitching, probing the air outside the door. It was the same texture, the same obsidian sheen as the sample in my petri dish. He saw me. Or rather, the thing that was Albright registered my presence. It lunged, slamming its full weight against the door. The wood around the lock splintered, the deadbolt groaning in protest. "Aris?" A raspy, wet voice groaned. "Aris?" It wasn't his voice. It was a distorted, guttural imitation, laced with a wet click, like bones grinding. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. This wasn't some isolated incident, it was global. The speed, the sheer scale of the contagion, the horrifying mutation. Civilization completely collapsed was no longer a theoretical concept from a disaster movie. It was the reality unfolding just beyond my flimsy door. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't just stand here and wait to be torn apart. I had to move. My lab, my sanctuary, was now a death trap. I glanced at the side door, usually secured with a simple keycard lock, leading to the emergency stairwell. It was a long shot. The corridors would be swarming, but staying meant becoming another part of it. The tendril from Albright's face pressed against the glass of the window, leaving a slick, dark residue. It seemed to sense me, wiggling, trying to find a purchase, to push through. My scientific brain screamed for analysis, for data, for a logical explanation. But my primal brain, the one that wanted to survive, screamed to run. I fumbled for my lab keys, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. The metal retort stand felt heavier now, but also utterly useless. Albright was stronger. They were all stronger. This wasn't just disease, it was a fundamental shift.
a horror I was uniquely positioned to understand, yet utterly powerless to stop. What could a mycologist do against a planet-wide tentacle evolution? The answer echoed in the growing silence of my internal monologue. Absolutely nothing. But I could try to live. The door shuddered again, and a section of the wood paneling cracked, revealing a sliver of darkness behind it. Albright's unblinking eye stared through the gap. The tendril twitched. I had seconds.
My scientific curiosity, my entire life's work, had led me to this moment, staring down the barrel of an evolutionary gun. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning of the nightmare. The emergency stairwell door was locked as expected. My fingers fumbled with the keycard, adrenaline making my hands shake like a leaf in a hurricane. Behind me, the main lab door was groaning under the continued assault. Splinters of wood peppered the floor. I could hear Albright's wet, raspy breathing on the other side, punctuated by that horrific clicking sound. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth. The card reader beeped, a single blessed green light appearing. I twisted the handle, shoving the door open, and practically fell into the stairwell. It was dark, a faint smell of disinfectant clinging to the stale air. A sense of momentary relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a fresh wave of dread. I wasn't safe, just in a different kind of trap. I pulled the door shut behind me, not bothering to lock it. What was the point? They would find a way. My mind raced. 5 flights down. The university building was old, with thick concrete walls. Maybe the lower levels, the basement. A utility tunnel network connected to other buildings. A risky gamble, but better than waiting for Albright to chew his way through my lab door. I started down, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. Each creak of the old concrete, each shadow cast by the dim emergency lights, sent shivers down my spine. My retort stand, still clutched in my hand, felt like a feather. Useless. I needed something more, something definitive. The further down I went, the more the silence was broken by distant sounds. Muffled screams from above. A low, persistent rumble from the city outside, like a wounded beast. And then a new sound, coming from below. A slithering, a wet, dragging sound, like something heavy and slimy being pulled across the floor. My blood ran cold. They were in the stairwell. I pressed myself against the wall, straining my ears, my breath held tight in my chest. The slithering was closer now, coming up from the floor below. And then a moan, deeper, more resonant than Albright's. It sounded like it was struggling, dragging itself upwards. I had to make a choice. Go up and face Albright, who was probably through the lab door by now, or go down and confront whatever monstrosity was ascending the stairs. Up was certain death. Down was unknown. Unknown was a chance. A microscopic, improbable chance, but a chance nonetheless. I continued downwards, moving as quietly as possible, one slow, deliberate step at a time, hugging the inner wall. I could hear the slithering just around the next bend, on the 3rd floor landing. I peered over the railing, my heart a jackhammer in my chest. It was partially illuminated by a broken emergency light. A former security guard, a man named Henderson, whom I often shared pleasantries with. He was on his hands and knees, dragging himself up the stairs. His uniform was shredded, his skin a mottled gray. And from his back, erupting through the fabric, were 4 thick, black tendrils. They pulsed, glistening with a viscous fluid, digging into the concrete steps, pulling him upwards with sickening efficiency. One of them stretched out, tapping blindly at the air, its tip razor-sharp, searching. This was the tentacle evolution in full, grotesque motion. Humanity witnessed its own undoing. He paused, head twitching as if scenting the air. His empty eyes, devoid of all humanity, seemed to scan the darkness above him. Did they have enhanced senses now, beyond sight? My scientific brain, ever persistent, tried to analyze. Olfactory? Vibrational? The fungus was clearly a neuroparasite, integrating and expanding on the host's existing sensory pathways. I knew I couldn't outrun him, not in this confined space, not with those tendrils propelling him. I had to create a distraction. My eyes scanned the landing above. A heavy fire extinguisher, red and gleaming, stood against the wall. Taking a deep breath, I moved with a sudden burst of speed, grabbed the extinguisher, and heaved it over the railing, aiming for the landing below Henderson. It crashed with a deafening clang, echoing through the stairwell. Henderson stopped. His head snapped towards the sound. The tendrils on his back writhed, then pulled him in the direction of the noise. It bought me precious seconds. I sprinted downwards, taking 2 steps at a time, my rubber sole squealing on the concrete. The slithering sound immediately shifted, now coming from above, following me. They were fast, alarmingly fast. I burst through the door to the ground floor, into the main lobby. It was a scene of utter devastation. Glass shattered everywhere, overturned furniture, scattered papers. The grand entrance doors, usually a shining beacon of academic pride, were a twisted wreck of metal and wood, pushed inward. And through the gaping maw, I could see the street. It was a horror show. Cars ablaze, bodies everywhere, and the shuffling, moaning figures. Many of them had the same grotesque tentacle growths I'd seen on Albright and Henderson. The air was thick with smoke, the metallic tang of blood, and a strange, earthy, mushroom-like odor that made my stomach churn. Civilization completely collapsed. It was starkly, terrifyingly real. The utter silence from any official channels, the absence of sirens, military, anything. It was over. I stumbled, my legs feeling like jelly. The lobby was mostly empty, but the sounds from outside were overwhelming. Screams, distant explosions, the persistent, chilling moan of the infected. I could hear Henderson's tendrils scraping down the stairwell behind me, gaining on me. I spotted a shattered display case, its contents spilling on the floor. Historical artifacts, preserved specimens. My eyes fixed on a heavy, ceremonial spear, part of an ancient African exhibit. It was probably just a replica, but it looked solid and sharp, better than a retort stand. I snatched it up, my hands closing around the rough wooden shaft. It felt surprisingly good, balancing perfectly. Primordial. A desperate echo of our ancestors, fighting for survival against things they couldn't comprehend. Just like me. The stairwell door burst open, and Henderson emerged, his tendrils whipping around, testing the air. He saw me, or detected me. He lunged, faster than I thought possible, propelled by those powerful black appendages. His face, once kind, was a mask of ravenous hunger. "I'm sorry, Henderson," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. He was already gone. This was not the man I knew. This was the tentacle evolution at work, a biological puppet master, pulling the strings of a reanimated corpse. He was on me in a flash, those tendrils reaching, grasping. One lashed out, wrapping around my ankle. I cried out as it tightened, razor-sharp barbs digging into my flesh. I fell, the spear clattering against the marble floor. He was on top of me, his dead weight crushing the air from my lungs. His jaws gaped open, a black, pulsing orifice where his tongue should be. A thin, internal tendril squirmed within his mouth, probing, anticipating. I screamed, a pathetic, strangled sound. His hands, still surprisingly human, clamped around my throat. The tendrils on his back arched, threatening to impale me. I thrashed, desperate, feeling the life drain from me. My hand scrabbled on the floor, found the spear. I drove it upwards, blindly, with all the force I could muster. It sank into his chest with a wet thud, deep into the sternum. He jerked, a gurgling sound escaping his throat, but he didn't stop, didn't even loosen his grip. His eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking. The tendril from his mouth twitched, getting closer. No, I couldn't die here, not like this. I wasn't just a mycologist anymore.
I was a survivor. I was going to fight. I twisted the spear, wrenching it to the side. The shaft grated against bone and cartilage. Still, he didn't let go. This thing, this tentacle evolution, didn't have vital organs in the traditional sense. Or, if it did, they were no longer in the same place. Head, that was the weakness. Always the head. I remembered the old movies, the survival guides I'd scoffed at.
I brought my knee up, smashing it into his side. He grunted, a wet rattling sound, but his grip remained. I had to get him off me. One of his tendrils snaked towards my face, its tip razor sharp, probing for my eye. I jerked my head back, feeling a cold swipe as it missed by an inch. Pure instinct took over. I let go of the spear. My hand shot up, grabbing his head, twisted. A sickening crunch. It broke. His neck snapped at an unnatural angle. He went limp, his body slumping on top of me, his tendrils ceasing their frantic movements. The internal tendril in his mouth still pulsed weakly, but he was finally still. I pushed his dead weight off me, gasping for air, my throat raw. Blood, dark and thick, oozed from his chest wound, pooling on the marble floor. My ankle throbbed where the tendril had dug in. I scrambled to my feet, snatching the spear. It was slick with his blood, but it felt right. A primitive tool for a primitive world. My eyes spanned the ruined lobby. The emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The sound of shuffling and moaning from outside grew louder, drawing closer to the gaping entrance. They knew. They always knew. I was still alive, and they were coming. The first part of my nightmare was over. The true struggle for survival, for understanding this twisted tentacle evolution, had just begun. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that civilization completely collapsed meant I was entirely, horrifyingly alone. The metallic tang of blood in my mouth mixed with the coppery taste of fear. My throat was raw, my ankle a searing pain with every step. I limped through the ruined lobby, the spear clutched tight in my hand, its weight a strangely comforting anchor in the maelstrom of terror. Henderson's body lay slumped where it fell, his tendrils now lifeless, though they still looked like something dreaming of movement. I couldn't afford to look back. I couldn't afford a moment of weakness. The street outside was a tableau of apocalyptic horror. Cars, some still smoking, others flipped onto their sides, formed an impromptu barricade. Bodies lay scattered like discarded dolls, many disfigured by the same dark, chitinous tendrils I now knew so intimately. The sheer scale of it was impossible to comprehend. Just hours ago, this had been a bustling city street, full of life, commerce, mundane concerns. Now, it was a graveyard. Civilization completely collapsed, and it had done so with a speed that defied logic, a speed that only a biologically engineered nightmare could achieve. I had to get out of here. The university was a death trap. Too many open spaces, too many blind corners, too many places for them to hide. My home, Ilara. The thought jolted me, a desperate, irrational beacon of hope.
She worked from home, a freelance graphic designer. Maybe, just maybe, she'd heard the news, locked down, was waiting. But a colder, more logical part of my brain whispered that if the university had fallen so quickly, a residential area wouldn't stand a chance. Still, it was my only destination, my only driving force. I began to move, hugging the side of the buildings, trying to stay in the deeper shadows. The moaning of the infected was a constant soundtrack, a chorus of the damned. They shuffled, they lurched, some of them with bodies horribly distended by the burgeoning tendrils, others with limbs that moved at unnatural angles, controlled by the internal puppetry of the parasite. I saw a mother, her child clutched in her arms, trying to run. Her legs were too slow. A blur of movement from a nearby alley. A figure, almost entirely obscured by a mass of coiling black tendrils that seemed to flow over its body like a grotesque cloak. It moved with terrifying speed, faster than anything I'd seen so far. One of its tendrils shot out, incredibly long, wrapping around the mother's ankle. She screamed, a sound that tore through me, but it was cut short as she was dragged into the alley, her child still clutched in her dying embrace. My breath hitched. I wanted to help. Every fiber of my being screamed to intervene. But what could I do? Charge into an alley against something that moved that fast, that had that kind of reach? It would be suicide. My failure to act burned a hole in my conscience, a fresh wound in an already bleeding soul. "What would you have done?" I silently asked the empty street, a question that would plague me for days, for weeks, perhaps forever. I continued my painful trek, one block at a time, each step a testament to sheer willpower. The smell was overwhelming now. Ozone from the fires, putrefaction from the bodies, and that strange, earthy, almost sweet fungal scent that meant the tentacle evolution was actively at work. I saw it on the walls of buildings, grotesque black fungal growths spreading like gangrene. On parked cars, tendrils had pushed through the upholstery, reaching blindly for the sun. The sheer adaptability of this organism was terrifying. It wasn't just a parasite of flesh, it was a parasite of the environment itself, transforming everything it touched. I ducked into an abandoned pharmacy, the glass door shattered, the interior a chaotic mess of overturned shelves and spilled medications. The air here was thick with the scent of chemicals, momentarily masking the pervasive rot. I needed to scavenge, water, painkillers for my ankle, anything. The silence inside was absolute, heavy, oppressive. It felt wrong, too quiet. My hand instinctively tightened on the spear. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. My eyes scanned the aisles, my ears straining for any sound. Then a faint rustling from the back, near the prescription counter. My heart pounded. I moved slowly, silently, weaving through the debris. The retort stand had been a joke. The spear felt like an extension of my arm. Behind the counter, a pharmacist, or what remained of him, lay slumped against a wall. His body was a horror show. His stomach had burst open, not with blood and guts, but with a writhing mass of black, chitinous tendrils, thick as my arm, pulsing and glistening. They seemed to be anchored deep within his torso, slowly pulling themselves free, like a grotesque birth. One of them, still connected to his internal organs, twitched violently, as if in a death throe. This was what happened when the tentacle evolution reached its grotesque maturity within a host. It was no longer just about reanimation, it was about propagation. I gagged, bile rising in my throat. I backed away, pressing a hand over my mouth to stifle the sound. This was beyond anything I had ever studied, beyond anything known to science. It was a new, horrifying paradigm of life. I found a first aid kit, surprisingly intact, beneath a shattered display. I quickly patched up my ankle, the antiseptic stinging. Painkillers, water. I shoved a handful of granola bars into my pockets, survival supplies, things I never thought I'd need beyond a camping trip. As I turned to leave, my gaze fell on a shelf of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. My mycologist brain, for a fleeting second, wondered if any of these could work. But the scale, the sheer, overwhelming global scale, and the rapid evolution. Anything I found here would be a drop in an ocean of biological warfare. The parasite was too advanced, too adaptable. It was rewriting the rules of life, and humanity witnessed it all, completely unprepared. I slipped out of the pharmacy, the grim reality of the world slamming back into me. The sun was setting now, painting the ruined city in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. The silhouettes of the infected, tendrils writhing against the dying light, were truly demonic. The horror was growing, adapting. I could feel it, an almost tangible dread in the air. This wasn't just about escaping the city.
It was about understanding what we were up against. My home was a goal, yes, but the real question was, what was next? How did you fight something that was evolving faster than you could comprehend? What hope did we have when civilization completely collapsed under the weight of a biological entity that twisted flesh into a horrifying tentacled weapon? The night was coming, and with it, new terrors. I felt it in my bones.
The sky bled from orange to bruised purple, then deepened into an inky black, punctuated only by the distant, angry glow of burning buildings. The air grew colder, but the oppressive, earthy scent of the tentacle evolution seemed to intensify with the darkness. My ankle throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, a constant reminder of my vulnerability. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, to twist into the shape of a lurking threat. I continued my desperate trek towards my neighborhood, navigating the debris-strewn streets. The infected seemed less active in the complete darkness, their movements slower, more aimless. But I knew that was a false sense of security. They were still there, still a terrifying, hungry presence. And the ones with the advanced tentacle growths, the ones that moved with terrifying speed, they were the true nightmare. They were the apex predators of this new, twisted world. Humanity witnessed this transformation, helpless to stop it. My mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. The deep-sea origin, the rapid adaptability, the neuroparasitic nature. It wasn't just turning people into zombies, it was using them as breeding grounds, as vectors, as raw material for its own horrifying agenda. I had to cross the bridge. There was no other way to my home. The thought of Ilara, safe or not, spurred me forward. I began to pick my way through the wreckage, carefully stepping over bodies, trying not to disturb the uneasy silence. The wind, which had been a gentle breeze earlier, had picked up, carrying with it strange, high-pitched whistling sounds from the twisted metal of the bridge. It sounded like the world was groaning in its death throes. Suddenly, a sound, a wet click, distinct from the wind. It came from beneath one of the overturned cars, closer than I liked. My heart leaped into my throat. I froze, holding my breath, straining to hear. The click repeated, then a soft scrape, like something dragging itself over rusted metal. I knew that sound.
It was the movement of the chitinous tendrils scraping against hard surfaces. One of them was here, hiding, waiting. My eyes darted around, trying to pierce the gloom. The spear felt heavy, insufficient. I needed to see it, needed to know what I was up against. This bridge was a choke point, a killing ground. A tendril, thick as my wrist and impossibly long, snaked out from under an overturned minivan, its tip probing the air, twitching, searching. It glistened in the faint light like polished obsidian. It was longer than anything I'd seen on Albright or Henderson, more developed, more powerful. I crouched low, pressing myself against the twisted hulk of a bus, trying to become invisible. The tendril retracted, then reappeared, moving in a slow, deliberate arc, like a snake sensing its prey. It was hunting, and I was the prey. I could see the faint outline of the creature now, hunched beneath the minivan. It was massive, far larger than any infected human I'd encountered. Its body seemed to ripple and distort, almost fluid, making it difficult to discern its original form. And it had more tendrils, many more, pulsing and writhing around it, a living, deadly crown of black appendages. This was the tentacle evolution in a terrifying new form, a truly evolved hunter. It emitted a low, guttural growl, a sound that vibrated through the metal of the bus, through my very bones. It knew I was here. It was toying with me. My scientific brain screamed for analysis, for understanding, but my survival instinct was overriding everything else. Run. But where? Back to the city center? Into the unknown darkness of the residential district? This thing was fast. I knew it. Suddenly, another noise, a faint whimper. It came from the passenger side of the minivan, almost directly above the creature. My eyes darted up. A small, bloodied hand was pressed against the inside of the window, fingers twitching weakly. Someone was alive in there, trapped. My mind reeled. What kind of monstrous dilemma was this? Stay hidden, try to slip past, or try to help? Helping meant confronting that thing, a creature of pure nightmare. Staying meant leaving someone to a horrific, agonizing death. The weight of that choice, the moral calculus, was suffocating. This was comment bait in the most terrible, real sense. What would any sane person do? What would I do? I thought of Alara. If she were trapped, I would want someone to try. I gripped the spear. My hands were shaking, but a cold resolve began to solidify within me. I was a mycologist, not a hero. But I was still human, and humanity witnessed its fall. Maybe one human could still make a difference. I took a deep breath, the foul air filling my lungs. I had to create a diversion, a loud one.
My eyes landed on a ruptured gas tank from a nearby car, a faint sheen of spilled fuel visible on the pavement. Desperate, dangerous, but perhaps my only chance. I moved, not towards the creature, but towards the gas tank. Each step was agony, but I pushed through it. The creature under the minivan heard me, its tendrils whipping outwards, testing the air. It rose, slowly, deliberately, revealing its full, terrifying form. It was indeed massive, easily twice the size of a man. Its original human host almost entirely consumed and replaced by a pulsating, tentacled mass of black tissue. Its head was a featureless orb, multiple smaller tendrils erupting from where its mouth and eyes should be, constantly twitching, tasting the air. It lunged, a sudden, horrifying burst of speed, one of its primary tendrils shooting out, aiming for my chest. I dove, rolling behind a shattered taxi, feeling the wind of its passage brush my hair. The tendril smashed into the taxi with bone-jarring force, denting the metal. I scrambled to my feet, spear at the ready, and saw a flickering spark from a downed power line nearby. It was a dangerous idea, an insane idea, but I had to try. I needed to lure that thing to the fuel. "Hey!" I screamed, my voice raw, full of fear and defiance. "Over here, you monstrous aberration!" The creature turned, its featureless head tilting, the multiple tendrils on its face writhing in what I could only interpret as grotesque curiosity. It was intelligent, far more than any mindless zombie. This tentacle evolution wasn't just instinctual, it was adaptive, possibly cunning. It let out another guttural growl, then launched itself forward, a terrifying blur of black tendrils and twisted flesh. It was fast, too fast. I realized with a gut-wrenching certainty that I had made a terrible mistake. I wasn't going to make it to the power line. I was going to die here, on this bridge, consumed by the horrifying reality of what civilization completely collapsed truly meant. The tendrils were already reaching for me. There was no escape. The creature's main tendril whipped forward, a blur of glistening black, aimed directly at my chest. I saw it coming, felt the rush of displaced air, and knew I was too slow. My scientific brain, detached even in the face of imminent death, noted the precision, the sheer power. This wasn't a blunder. It was a deliberate, lethal strike. Humanity witnessed its own biological undoing, and I was about to become part of the dataset. But then, a screech of tires. Impossible. From behind me, a beat-up pickup truck, its headlight shattered, its engine sputtering, lurched onto the bridge. It was driving erratically, swerving around the wreckage. The creature, its tentacle just inches from my chest, hesitated. It registered the new threat, the new source of noise and movement. Its featureless head swiveled towards the truck. The tendril paused, its tip twitching. "Get in!" a voice yelled, rough and urgent. "Idiot, don't just stand there!" The truck was slowing, a figure leaning out the passenger window, gesturing frantically. It was a man, his face grim, a shotgun clutched in his hand. My decision was instantaneous. Survival. Always survival. I didn't question the miracle, didn't wonder who they were or where they came from. I sprinted towards the truck, my injured ankle screaming in protest. The creature, realizing its primary target was escaping, roared, a sound that was less growl and more a screech of pure alien frustration. Its tendrils lashed out, one catching the back bumper of the truck, tearing a chunk of metal away with terrifying ease. The shotgun boomed. The man in the passenger seat fired, the blast tearing into the creature's tentacled mass. It shrieked, a high-pitched, piercing sound that scraped against my eardrums, and recoiled, a viscous black fluid splattering onto the pavement. I yanked open the back door of the pickup and threw myself inside, landing hard on the bench seat. The man at the wheel slammed the gas pedal, and the truck lurched forward, tires squealing, leaving the enraged, screaming creature behind. "That was too close, Professor," the man with the shotgun said, turning to look at me, his eyes assessing, wary. "Didn't think anyone else was alive out here, especially not one with a spear." "Eris Thorne," I gasped, trying to catch my breath, "mycologist." My mind was still reeling from the encounter, from the unexpected rescue. "Silas," the driver grunted, not looking at me, his eyes fixed on the road, dodging debris. "And this is Maya." He gestured with the shotgun towards the man beside him. "She's quiet." Maya. She was indeed quiet, her face etched with a grim determination. Her eyes were sharp, constantly scanning the ruined landscape outside the window. Her hands, though, were steady, reloading the shotgun with practiced ease. So Silas was the driver, Maya the shooter, an efficient, deadly team. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "Out," Silas said simply. "As far from this God-forsaken city as we can get. We saw the bombing starting. This place is going to be ground zero." Bombings. The explosions I'd heard earlier. Military intervention, trying to contain the tentacle evolution with explosives. A futile gesture, I knew. Bombing only released more spores, created more aerosolized nightmares, scattered the infected. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. "It won't work," I said, my voice heavy with certainty. "This isn't just a virus. It's a highly adaptable parasitic fungus. Blasting it apart will only spread it further. The spores, the mycelial networks, they're everywhere." Maya looked at me then, her expression unreadable. "You sound like you know what you're talking about." "I study fungi," I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I specialize in extremophiles, things that thrive in impossible conditions. This is the ultimate extremophile. It's not just reanimating bodies, it's integrating, evolving. The tendrils aren't just growths, they're extensions of its neural network, sensory organs, locomotion, weapons. Humanity witnessed a paradigm shift, not just an outbreak." Silas snorted. "Sounds like you got a hell of a thesis for your doctorate, Professor, if there's still a world left to publish it in." His voice was devoid of hope, but his hands remained steady on the wheel. We drove in silence for a while, the only sounds, the rumbling engine, the occasional distant explosion, and the frantic beat of my own heart. The city gave way to suburbs, which were equally devastated. Houses burned, cars lay abandoned in driveways, and the same shuffling figures wandered aimlessly. But I noticed something new. The fungal growths on the houses here were more pronounced, more vibrant. On some, the black tendrils had woven themselves into the brickwork, forming grotesque, living patterns, almost like art. The tentacle evolution was actively claiming the landscape. "We need to get to higher ground," I said, my scientific mind pushing past the terror. "Observe the spread. If it's fungal, elevation might offer some respite from airborne spores, and a vantage point for understanding its distribution." Silas glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "What good will understanding do us, Professor, when we're all dead?" "Knowledge is survival," I retorted, perhaps too sharply.
Understanding its weakness, its patterns, its life cycle, that's our only hope. Otherwise, we're just running blindly. Maya, still silent, nodded slowly. He's right, Silas. We don't just run, we survive smart. Silas grumbled, but didn't argue. There's an old fire lookout tower up past the county line. Might still be standing, if we can get through. The county line, I murmured, thinking of Ilara. My home was probably gone. My neighborhood, a casualty of the civilization, completely collapsed. But the tower, it offered a chance to regroup, to analyze, to plan, to not just survive, but to fight back, however futile that fight might seem. The truck hit a massive pothole, rattling us all. The world outside remained a desolate, terrifying landscape. The tentacle evolution was relentless, insidious, and everywhere. And as the truck sped into the darkness, leaving the burning city behind, I knew that my journey had only just begun. The pursuit of scientific knowledge had been my life, but now it was my only weapon. And a weapon I desperately needed to wield, not just for myself, but for the remnants of humanity witnessed crumbling before my very eyes. The fire lookout tower stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky, a stark, lonely sentinel atop a desolate hill. It was rusted, weathered, but miraculously intact. The climb was arduous, each step on the metal grating groaning under our weight, a painful reminder of my still aching ankle. Silas, strong and silent, led the way, his shotgun slung across his back. Maya followed, her movements fluid and cautious, her eyes constantly sweeping the surrounding tree line. I, the mycologist, the man of books and petri dishes, brought up the rear, clutching my spear like a relic from another age. Civilization completely collapsed meant no maintenance, no power. The tower's small cabin at the top was cold, dusty, and abandoned. But from its panoramic windows, the view was breathtakingly, horrifyingly clear. Below us, the city spread out, a vast, smoldering ruin. Pillars of black smoke choked the horizon. The distant rumble of explosions had ceased, replaced by an eerie, profound silence. But the true horror was the landscape itself. The tentacle evolution was undeniable. From our perch, I could see vast swaths of forest surrounding the city, now scarred with black, undulating growths. Some trees were completely encased in the chitinous tendrils, their leaves withered, their branches twisted into grotesque, unnatural shapes. It looked like the forest itself was writhing in agony, transformed into a giant, silent, pulsating organ. And dotting the landscape, moving with slow, deliberate purpose, were the infected. Small figures, dwarfed by the scale of the destruction, but each one a testament to the parasitic horror. "My God," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "It's worse than I thought. The mycelial network, it's spread beyond the city. It's actively consuming the ecosystem." Silas grunted, peering through a pair of binoculars he'd found in the cabin. "So, no safe haven in the woods, then?" "No," I confirmed, my voice hollow. "The spores are everywhere, airborne, waterborne. And the tendrils, they're tapping into nutrient sources directly, converting biomass." I pointed to a particularly large pulsating growth on a distant hill. "That's likely a primary aggregation point, a spore generator, a living engine of destruction." Maya, usually so stoic, shivered. "So, what's the plan, Professor?" Her gaze was fixed on the tendril-covered forest, a primal fear in her eyes. "We can't stay here forever." "No," I agreed. "We need to understand this. My theory, this isn't just a parasite. It's a bioengineering intelligence. It adapts, it learns, it evolves at an exponential rate. Humanity witnessed its initial outbreak, but this is its next phase." "Intelligence?" Silas scoffed. "You think a mushroom can think?" "Not a mushroom as we know it," I corrected, my scientific fervor momentarily overriding my fear. "A network, A distributed consciousness. Think of a slime mold, but magnified 1,000,000 times, with the ability to rewrite organic code. It's creating new forms, new functions, based on environmental pressures. The different types of infected we've seen, the slow shufflers, the fast hunters, the larger tentacled behemoths, they're not just random mutations. They're specialized forms, each serving a purpose in the collective organism's spread. So we're not fighting zombies, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. We're fighting a living supercomputer that wants to turn us into fertilizer? Precisely, I said, a grim sense of triumph mixed with abject terror. And if we don't understand its programming, its protocols, we can't hope to defeat it. My mind raced back to my research, to obscure papers I'd dismissed as theoretical nonsense. Papers on extremophile fungi that could incorporate metallic nanoparticles, rapidly generate bioluminescence, even mimic rudimentary neural networks. It had always seemed like science fiction. Now, it was horrifying reality. I need data, I said, turning from the window. I need my lab, or a library, something, anything that can tell me how this could have started, how it works. There might be a weakness, a vulnerability. Every organism has one. Your lab is gone, Professor, Silas reminded me gently. The city's a charnel house. Then we find another, I insisted. A university, a research facility, even a large bookstore might have enough information. We need to focus on its origin, the deep-sea drilling expedition that brought my sample. If that's where it came from, then the ocean itself could be the source. Maya pointed to a map tacked to the wall, left behind by the fire lookout. There's an old NOAA research station, coastal, about 100 miles west of here. Mostly geological, but they might have some deep-sea biological records. My heart leaped. Perfect. It's a long shot, but it's a lead. It's a mission, not just running. Silas still looked skeptical, but he didn't argue. He knew that hope, however thin, was a powerful motivator in a world where civilization completely collapsed. So we scavenge a vehicle, gather supplies, and head for the coast, I said, my voice gaining strength. We learn about this tentacle evolution from its source. We find out how to fight it. We reclaim what's left of humanity witnessed before it's too late. We spent the rest of the night planning, scavenging the meager supplies in the tower. Stale canned goods, a few water bottles. We found an old, battered map, a pair of rusty wire cutters, and a half-empty box of shotgun shells. Not much, but enough to fuel a fragile hope. As the sun began to rise, casting long, eerie shadows across the devastated landscape, I felt a new resolve harden within me. Fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was now tempered by purpose. I was no longer just a terrified survivor. I was a scientist, pursuing knowledge, even if that knowledge led to the darkest corners of biological horror. What would you do? I asked myself, staring at the map. Run and hide, or confront the monster at its source? The answer was clear. We had to confront it. The survival of whatever was left of humanity depended on it. And somewhere, out there, was the key to understanding the tentacle evolution, the key to unraveling the monstrous tapestry of how civilization completely collapsed. The journey to the coast was a grueling odyssey through a landscape utterly transformed by the tentacle evolution. Each mile was a testament to the swift, merciless nature of the apocalypse. We found a battered old SUV on the outskirts of the city, its windows smashed, but surprisingly intact engine-wise. Silas, a former mechanic, coaxed it to life with surprising ease, and we set off, leaving the burning city behind, a grim monument to a fallen world. The roads were a chaotic graveyard of abandoned vehicles, forcing us to take circuitous routes through smaller towns, each one a silent testament to how civilization completely collapsed. The eerie quiet of these places was punctuated only by the distant moans of the infected, or the unnerving rustle of tendrils in the wind. The fungal growth was rampant. It wasn't just on the buildings and trees anymore. It had spread to the roads, forming slick black patches that made driving treacherous. It pulsed faintly, even in the daylight, absorbing nutrients from the asphalt, the dust, anything organic or inorganic it could break down. This was an organism of terrifying efficiency. We encountered more types of infected. Beyond the basic shufflers and the fast, tentacled hunters, we saw grotesque amalgamations. Some were almost entirely consumed by the tendrils, their bodies distended, bloated, moving like massive, slow-moving fungal sacs, trailing sticky black residue. Others, particularly in areas near power lines, seemed to have incorporated metallic elements, their tendrils crackling with faint bioelectrical discharges. The tentacle evolution was relentless, adapting to every available resource, every environmental niche.
It's like it's becoming part of the infrastructure, I observed, pointing out a cluster of tendrils that had woven themselves into a downed power pole, a faint hum emanating from the pulsating mass. A living, parasitic grid. Silas just grunted, his face grim. Just drive, Professor, and keep your eyes open. Our conversations were sparse, usually functional. Silas was a man of few words, driven by a raw, primal need to survive. Maya, still mostly silent, was an enigma. Her eyes held a haunted sadness, but also an unwavering focus. She was the one who spotted them first, a group of infected converging on a distant farmhouse. "New type," she murmured, pointing with the shotgun. "Larger." I looked through the binoculars. My breath hitched. It was a farm animal. A cow, but not just a cow. Its body was grotesquely swollen, its hide covered in thick black tendrils that lashed out, pulling at the fence posts. From its back, two massive chitinous appendages, like scythes, had burst forth, carving deep furrows in the earth as it moved. This was the tentacle evolution, weaponizing other species, turning livestock into living engines of destruction. "It's not just humans," I whispered, the implications chilling me to the bone. "It's all animal life. And if it's animals, it could be plants too. It could be everything." "Of course it's everything," Silas said, his voice flat. "Didn't you see the trees, Professor?" The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The abyssal bloom. Deep sea. Extremophile. It didn't care about warmth, light, specific hosts. It was a universal parasite, a fundamental rewrite of life itself. Humanity witnessed the end, not just of itself, but of the very ecosystem it called home. We drove through a particularly dense forest, the black fungal growths on the trees forming a canopy of shadow that blocked out the sky. The air was heavy, damp, and thick with the cloying, earthy smell of the fungus. It felt like driving through the belly of a beast. Suddenly, the SUV's engine sputtered, coughed, and died. "No," Silas growled, slamming his fist on the dashboard. "Not here, not now." He tried the ignition again. Just a sickening click. The silence that followed was deafening, amplified by the pervasive sounds of the forest, the rustling of tendrils, the faint, wet clicks of unseen movement. We were stranded, in the heart of the tentacle evolution-infested woods. "Fuel pump," Silas muttered, getting out. "Probably debris in the line, or it just gave out." Maya and I exchanged a look. This was it, the moment we'd been dreading. "Stay with the vehicle," Silas instructed, pulling his pistol. "I'll see if I can jury-rig something. It won't be long." But he was wrong. It was already too late. From the depths of the forest, the shuffling began. Closer now, and more than just shuffling. A guttural chittering sound, unlike anything I'd heard before. It sounded like dozens of insects, magnified and distorted, mixed with the wet, tearing sounds of tendrils slicing through undergrowth. "Get back in, Silas," Maya shouted, raising her shotgun, her eyes wide with alarm. He saw it then, too. Through the dense trees, shadows detached themselves from the gloom. Not just single infected, a pack. And these were different,
faster, more coordinated. Their tendrils were longer, thicker, and seemed to have developed rudimentary sensory organs at their tips, constantly twitching, tasting the air. This was beyond anything I had witnessed. This was the true terror of the tentacle evolution, adapting and hunting with horrifying efficiency. Silas scrambled back into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. "They're circling us," he said, his voice tight. "They're trying to cut off our escape." "They're too many," Maya said, her knuckles white around the shotgun. "We can't fight a whole horde in this terrain." "Then we don't fight," I said, my mind racing, recalling my knowledge of fungal behavior. "We run, to the coast. It's still our only hope." But even as I said it, I knew the futility. We were trapped. And the chittering was getting closer. The dark shapes were already emerging from the trees, a tide of living nightmare, their tendrils weaving and lashing in the oppressive darkness of the fungal forest. "What choice do we have?" I whispered, to no one, to everyone. "What choice do we have when civilization completely collapsed and the enemy is simply evolution?" The chittering grew louder, a cacophony of clicks and wet rustling that scraped against my nerves. Through the dense fungal-choked undergrowth, I could see them now. Not just a few, but dozens of them, moving with a horrifying, coordinated purpose. These weren't the aimless shufflers of the city. These were hunters, their tendrils lashing out, clearing paths, probing the air. They were larger, many of them, their bodies grotesquely distended, multiple black tendrils erupting from their flesh, pulsating and glistening. The tentacle evolution had forged a new kind of predator, intelligent and relentless. "Out of the car," Silas commanded, his voice tight with urgency. "Now, it's a coffin." We spilled out of the SUV, Maya covering us with her shotgun, Silas with his pistol, and me with my spear, feeling utterly exposed. The air in the forest was thick with the earthy, sweet fungal scent, and something else now, a metallic tang, like old blood. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my chest. "Where do we go?" Maya shouted over the growing din.
"West!" I yelled, pointing deeper into the woods, towards the distant coast. "Follow the setting sun. We have to keep moving." The infected surged forward, a wave of nightmare. Maya fired, the shotgun blasts echoing deafeningly through the trees. One of the tentacled creatures, a massive, human-shaped mass of writhing appendages, stumbled and fell, but two more immediately took its place. They weren't deterred. "They're too fast," Silas yelled, firing his pistol. "They're flanking us." He was right. Some of them were moving with incredible speed, their tendrils digging into the soft earth, propelling them forward in jerky, unnatural bursts. They were trying to cut us off, herding us deeper into the forest, into their territory. This wasn't random aggression, it was a coordinated hunt. This tentacle evolution possessed a horrifying rudimentary intelligence, a collective consciousness. "Don't bunch up," I shouted, remembering basic military tactics from some long-forgotten movie. "Spread out, make yourselves harder targets." We broke into a desperate run, weaving through the trees, the ground uneven and slick with fungal slime. My injured ankle screamed in protest, but I pushed through the pain, fueled by pure adrenaline. The chittering chorus of the infected was right behind us, getting closer. I could feel the vibrations of their movements through the soles of my shoes. A tendril, thick as a rope, suddenly shot out from behind a gnarled, fungus-covered oak, wrapping around Silas's leg. He cried out, stumbling, falling heavily to the ground. The creature that had snared him, a grotesque, multi-tendrilled monstrosity, began to drag him back into the shadows. "Silas!" Maya screamed, turning and firing her shotgun. The blast ripped into the creature, tearing away a chunk of its chitinous flesh, but it held fast to Silas. Another tendril lashed out, narrowly missing Maya's head. I didn't think. I swung my spear, plunging the sharp tip into the creature's main body, aiming for the pulsating mass I instinctively knew was its central nervous cluster.
It shrieked, a sound of pure agony, releasing Silas. He scrambled to his feet, grimacing, clutching his leg. "Go!" I yelled. "Keep running!" We resumed our desperate flight, Silas limping, but pushing himself forward with furious determination. The infected were closing in. We were cornered. Then I saw it. A clearing. Not a natural one. A dark, pulsating wall of intertwined tendrils forming a living barrier. It stretched across our path, impossibly tall, impossibly wide. And from within it, a low, resonant thrum, like a giant, distorted heartbeat. This was not just a forest. This was a nest.
A colossal manifestation of the tentacle evolution. Humanity witnessed a new form of horror, an architectural nightmare built from repurposed flesh and fungal biomass. "No!" Maya cried, skidding to a halt. "We can't go through there." "We have no choice," Silas rasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "They're behind us." Indeed, the chittering was now deafening, and I could see their dark forms emerging from the tree line, a relentless tide. We were trapped between the hunters and the unholy nest. "This is it," Maya whispered, raising her shotgun, her face pale, but her eyes burning with resolve. "This is how civilization completely collapsed for us." I looked at the living wall, at the pulsating tendrils, the faint, sickening light emanating from its depths. My mycologist brain, even in this moment of ultimate terror, was trying to understand. This wasn't just a barrier, it was a structure, a purpose-built, evolving structure. It seemed to breathe, to live, a grotesque monument to the triumph of alien biology. I remembered something from my studies on extremophile fungi. Some species could create bioluminescent structures as a form of communication or defense. This wall was likely both, a signal, a warning. A sudden sharp crack from the side, a massive tendril thick as a tree trunk, erupted from the ground beside us, slamming into a nearby tree and tearing it from its roots. It was an attack. The nest itself was alive. "Run along the wall," I screamed, grabbing Maya's arm. "Find a weakness. There has to be one." We sprinted parallel to the pulsating wall, the ground vibrating under our feet, the sounds from within the nest growing in intensity. It was a chorus of wet clicks, deep thrums, and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. A low, almost melodic hum that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Silas, despite his injured leg, was surprisingly fast, driven by sheer survival instinct. He fired his pistol at a cluster of smaller tendrils that snaked out from the wall, trying to entangle us. The bullets tore through the chitinous material, spraying black fluid, but the tendrils simply retracted, then regrew, thicker, faster. It was regenerating. "It's too dense," Maya shouted, her voice laced with despair. "There's no way through." But then I saw it, a gap. Not a true opening, but a section of the wall where the tendrils were thinner, less densely interwoven, almost as if they hadn't fully grown in. It was still thick, still pulsating, but it was a weakness, a slight imperfection in the terrifying symmetry of the tentacle evolution. "There," I pointed, pushing Maya towards it. "Through there, now!" We plunged towards the gap, the chittering of the infected from behind us growing louder, closer. I could feel their presence, a wave of cold dread washing over me. They were almost on us. My only thought was survival. Get through the wall, get out. But what awaited us on the other side? A new hell? A new, even more evolved manifestation of the nightmare that had made civilization completely collapsed? I had no idea. But I knew with chilling certainty that whatever it was, it would waiting. The gap in the tentacled wall was less of an opening and more of a tightly woven sieve of pulsing black tendrils. It was just wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time, and every surface was slick with a foul-smelling viscous fluid.
The low, resonant thrumming from within the nest intensified as we approached, vibrating in my teeth, in my very bones. It felt like walking into the maw of a living beast. "Go, Maya," Silas urged, pushing her forward. "I'll cover you." Maya hesitated for a split second, then plunged into the terrifying opening, her shotgun held tight against her chest. I heard her grunt as the tendrils scraped against her body, a wet, tearing sound. Behind us, the horde of tentacled infected had breached the tree line. Their chittering was deafening, their dark forms swarming towards us. Silas fired his pistol rapidly, a desperate attempt to buy us time. 2 shots, 3. Then a click. Empty. "My turn," he said grimly, and followed Maya into the pulsing gap, his broad shoulders struggling against the elastic resistance of the tendrils. I saw him wince as a particularly sharp tendril scraped against his cheek. Then it was my turn. The air within the gap was thick, humid, and heavy with the cloying, earthy scent of the fungus, mixed with something else, something metallic and sweet that turned my stomach. I pushed through, feeling the slimy tendrils brush against my face, my arms, my clothes. They felt strangely warm, almost alive, like muscles contracting. My entire body protested, every nerve ending screaming in disgust, but I forced myself onward. This was the tentacle evolution, up close and personal, a truly intimate horror. I squeezed through, stumbling into another clearing on the other side. Maya was on her knees, coughing, wiping the black residue from her face. Silas was beside her, his hand pressed against a bleeding gash on his arm. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a combination of fear and awe. "What in God's name was that?" he whispered, staring back at the living wall we had just breached. The clearing was vast, silent, and illuminated by a faint, sickly green glow emanating from the ground, from the tendrils themselves. It was a bizarre, alien landscape. Massive, pulsating fungal growths, like gigantic black organs, dotted the terrain. Interspersed among them were partially consumed trees, their branches twisting into skeletal claws, covered in the same black tendrils that now glowed faintly. The air was thick with spores, visible as shimmering motes in the unearthly light. And in the center of the clearing, rising like a grotesque cathedral, was a colossal structure of intertwined tendrils, easily 100 feet tall, pulsing with a slow rhythmic beat. It was the heart of the nest, the primary spore generator, the very engine of the tentacle evolution. "This is beyond anything I could have imagined," I breathed, my scientific curiosity warring with profound dread. "It's building. It's creating an ecosystem entirely for itself. This isn't just an insection, it's a terraforming event." "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, her voice full of a strange, terrifying reverence. "And awful." Her words resonated with me. There was a horrifying, almost sublime beauty to the scale of this biological horror. The intricate weaving of tendrils, the synchronized pulsing, the alien bioluminescence. It was nature, but twisted, perverted, and utterly terrifying. This was the ultimate realization of the phrase, "Humanity witnessed tentacle evolution," a living monument to its own demise. Then a movement, slow, deliberate, from the base of the colossal central structure. A shape emerged, indistinct at first in the eerie green light. It was enormous, easily the size of a small truck. Its body was a mass of undulating tendrils, thicker and more numerous than anything we had encountered. But what truly froze my blood was its form. It wasn't human. It was something entirely new. A creature born directly from the tentacle evolution, an apex predator designed by the fungus itself. It had multiple limbs, each ending in a cluster of razor-sharp tendrils. Its head was a featureless obsidian sphere, but from its center, a single massive tendril extended upwards, constantly twitching like a colossal antenna sampling the air. It moved with a terrifying grace, silent, deliberate. It was patrolling its domain. It's not a host, Silas whispered, his voice hoarse with fear. It's grown. It's a construct, I corrected, my voice barely a whisper. A biological machine. The fungus isn't just infecting, it's engineering. This is what happens when civilization completely collapsed and a new dominant life form takes over. It builds its own soldiers, its own ecosystem. The creature paused, its antenna-like tendril twitching. Then, slowly, deliberately, it turned its obsidian head towards us. It had sensed us. It knew we were here. Run, Maya said, her voice devoid of emotion, but her eyes wide with terror. Now. But where?
We were in the middle of its nest, surrounded by its fungal growths, its airborne spores, its horrifying constructs. The tendrilled wall we had just come through was already closing, the gap thickening, sealing itself shut. We were trapped. The creature began to move towards us, slowly at first, then gaining speed. Each of its multi-tendrilled limbs moved with chilling precision, crushing the fungal growths beneath its weight, creating a faint, wet crunching sound. Its central antenna tendril was now aimed directly at us, twitching faster, more frantically. It was assessing us, calculating. "There's nowhere to go," Silas muttered, raising his empty pistol. A futile gesture, but a desperate human one. "We hide," I said, grabbing their arms, pulling them towards a cluster of the massive, pulsating fungal organs. "We camouflage ourselves. Maybe it can't see us if we blend in with its own environment." It was a desperate gamble, a mycologist's desperate hope that perhaps, by understanding its biology, we could exploit a weakness. We pressed ourselves against the slick, warm surface of one of the fungal organs, trying to become one with the grotesque landscape. The air vibrated with the creature's approach, with the pervasive hum of the nest. I could feel the spores settling on my skin, feel the tendrils of the massive fungal organ against my back, almost seeming to welcome me into its horrifying embrace. The scent of it was overwhelming now, choking, sickening. The creature was close, so close I could hear the faint, wet clicks of its tendrils, the soft thud of its massive limbs as it moved. It passed within feet of us, its immense shadow falling over our hiding place. The central antenna tendril was still twitching, still pointing, still searching. It knew we were here. It was just enjoying the hunt. The tentacle evolution was not just a biological force. It was a sentient, malevolent intelligence. My breath hitched, my heart pounded against my ribs. We were utterly, completely exposed, trapped in the heart of the beast. And as the immense, tentacled construct paused, its featureless head turning slowly towards our hiding place, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that our final desperate fight for survival was about to begin. And whatever it was, it would be a testament to the utter, horrifying collapse of everything humanity witnessed. The colossal tentacled construct paused, its featureless obsidian head tilting slowly towards our hiding spot. The massive antenna tendril at its center twitched, then pointed directly at us, pulsating with a sickening rhythm. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of our fear. It knew, it wasn't guessing. This thing was designed for detection, for hunting. The tentacle evolution had perfected its predators. "It sees us," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Silas, clutching his empty pistol, braced himself. His face was grim, but there was a spark of defiance in his eyes. I pressed myself harder against the pulsating fungal mass, hoping against hope that its own scent, its own biological signature, might offer some form of camouflage. It was a desperate, unscientific prayer. The creature took a step, its multi-tendrilled limb pressing down, crushing the fungal growths beneath it with a wet, squelching sound. It was a desperate, unscientific prayer. The creature took a step, its multi-tendrilled limb pressing down, crushing the fungal growths beneath it with a wet, squelching sound. It was moving with agonizing slowness now, savoring the moment like a cat toying with a trapped mouse. It was intelligent, far, far more intelligent than I had initially given it credit for. This wasn't just instinct, it was deliberate, malevolent awareness. It's playing with us, I breathed, the realization chilling me more than any physical threat. It's learning, it's studying. My mind raced, desperately trying to find a solution. How do you fight something that is not just physically overwhelming, but biologically engineered and possesses a nascent, terrifying intelligence? This was the ultimate challenge presented by the tentacle evolution, and it was a test we were failing. Then, a sudden, blinding flash, not from the creature, but from high above the nest. A brilliant white light, followed by a deafening roar that shook the very ground beneath us. Another explosion, closer this time, much closer than the city bombings. This one sounded like it was directly overhead. The colossal construct reeled, its obsidian head jerking upwards. The antenna tendril snapped back, retracting into its head. It emitted a high-pitched metallic shriek, a sound of pure agony and confusion. The entire nest vibrated, the ground trembling violently. Large sections of the colossal central structure began to tear, black fluid gushing from the ruptures. "What was that?" Silas yelled over the cacophony. "Military," Maya said, her eyes wide. "They must have found the nest. They're bombing it directly." A wave of profound relief, swiftly followed by a fresh surge of terror, washed over me. Relief that the creature was distracted, possibly injured. Terror that we were now caught in the crossfire of a desperate, last-ditch attempt to contain the tentacle evolution. "We move," I screamed, grabbing Silas and Maya. "Now! This is our chance!" We scrambled away from our hiding spot, abandoning any pretense of stealth. The creature was still flailing, its shriek echoing through the nest, its massive tendrils lashing out wildly, tearing at the ground, at the other fungal growths. It was blinded, disoriented. Another explosion, directly above us. A section of the central structure collapsed inward, sending a torrent of black, fungal debris and viscous fluid cascading down. The air was filled with a choking cloud of spores, an invisible, insidious threat. "Don't breathe it in," I yelled, pulling my shirt over my mouth and nose. "The spores, they'll infect you directly." We ran, weaving through the collapsing landscape, dodging falling debris and lashing tendrils. The ground bucked and groaned beneath our feet. The entire nest was unraveling, tearing itself apart under the bombardment. The sickly green bioluminescence flickered, then died in many places, plunging us into deeper shadow. The creature, its shriek subsiding into a low, guttural growl, was recovering. Its antenna tendril slowly re-emerged, sweeping the air. Even in its damaged state, it was still a formidable threat. It began to track us again, its movements more frantic now, fueled by rage. "We need to get out of the nest," Maya shouted, her voice strained. "Find the exit." But the exit was the tendrilled wall we had breached, and it was now a churning, chaotic mess of tearing biomass. The military bombardment was destroying everything, but it was also sealing us in. "This way," Silas yelled, pointing to a dark crevice in the ground, partially obscured by a toppled fungal growth. "A tunnel, maybe a maintenance access. This whole area used to be a mine." It was a desperate hope, a gamble, but we had no other choice. The ground shook again, more violent this time. A massive tendril from the central structure, thick as a tree, detached and fell, slamming into the ground just feet behind us, sending up a shower of black fluid and spores. We dove into the crevice, scrambling downwards into the pitch black. The air immediately grew colder, damp, and smelled of earth and old metal. I could hear the sounds of the collapsing nest fading above us, replaced by the ringing in my ears and the frantic beat of my own heart. Silas fumbled for a light, pulling out a small, battered flashlight from his pocket. The weak beam cut through the absolute darkness, revealing a narrow, uneven tunnel.
Rusting support beams lined the walls, and the ground was a mix of loose rock and muddy water. It was a mine shaft, forgotten, decaying, but for now, it was salvation. "How far down does this go?" Maya asked, her voice echoing unnaturally in the confined space. "No idea," Silas admitted, shining the light ahead. "Could be a dead end. Could go for miles." We began to move, slowly, cautiously, our footsteps splashing in the shallow water. The sounds of the outside world, the explosions, the shrieking of the tentacled construct, faded into a distant rumble.
We were deep underground, in the belly of the earth, away from the immediate horror of the tentacle evolution. But even here, the insidious reach of the fungus was apparent. Small, black, thread-like growths clung to the damp walls, pulsing faintly in the beam of Silas's flashlight. My mycologist eye recognized them instantly. Mycelial threads. The tentacle evolution was already colonizing the underground. There was no escape, not truly. This wasn't just a surface event, it was planetary. "We need to find a way out," I said, my voice filled with a fresh wave of despair. "A way to the coast, a way to the NOAA station." But as we moved deeper into the suffocating darkness, a new sound began to emerge from the inky blackness ahead. A faint, wet dragging, a slithering, and then a low, guttural moan, closer than it should have been. My blood ran cold. The tentacle evolution had found its way down here. It was waiting. The flashlight beam cut through the absolute darkness of the tunnel, illuminating the ancient, rusting mine shaft. The air was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of wet earth and decay. But mixed with that, subtly at first, then growing more distinct, was that unmistakable earthy, sweet fungal odor. The tentacle evolution was here. Even deep within the earth, there was no escape. The wet dragging sound intensified, accompanied by a low, guttural moan that echoed ominously in the confined space. Silas stopped dead, his flashlight beam trembling. Maya raised her shotgun, its metallic click shockingly loud in the silence. "What is that?" Maya whispered, her voice tight with suppressed fear. "Something that shouldn't be here," I breathed, my mycologist's brain already trying to process the horrifying implications. This tunnel was old, sealed off for decades. How could they have gotten in? Unless the fungus had always been here, dormant. Or, even worse, it was actively excavating. The moaning grew louder, closer. Then, a scraping sound, like thick tendrils dragging across rock. The beam of Silas's flashlight wavered, then steadied, revealing a horrifying sight just meters ahead. It was an infected miner. His body was a twisted wreck, still clad in a tattered, muddy uniform and hard hat. But his limbs were distended, grotesquely elongated by thick, black tendrils that snaked out from his joints, propelling him forward in a horrifying spider-like scuttle. His pickaxe, still clutched in a tendril-enhanced hand, scraped against the tunnel floor as he moved. And from his eye sockets, where eyes should have been, two smaller whip-like tendrils pulsed, twitching, probing the darkness. They were bioluminescent, casting a faint, sickly green glow that made his face a mask of pure terror. This was a specialized variant. An excavating form. The tentacle evolution was not just infecting, it was adapting its hosts for specific environmental tasks. This thing was designed for the dark, for the confined spaces, for tunneling. "Fire!" Silas yelled, his voice raw. Maya responded instantly, her shotgun booming in the confined space. The sound was deafening, reverberating painfully in our ears. The miner construct staggered, its head snapping back, but it didn't fall. The shot had hit its chest, but there was no vital organ to destroy. It just shrieked, a high-pitched, metallic squeal, and lunged forward, impossibly fast for something so cumbersome. "Head!" I screamed, instinctively, pointing with my spear. "Aim for the head!"
Maya fired again, the blast catching the minor construct in its hard hat. The helmet shattered, revealing a pulpy mass of black tendrils where its brain should have been. It spasmed violently, its elongated limbs thrashing, then collapsed to the ground, its tendrils slowly ceasing their movement. The sickly green glow from its eye tendrils faded. "It's everywhere," Silas whispered, his face pale. "There's no escape. Civilization completely collapsed, meant even the underground." I nodded, my mind reeling. My earlier hope that the Noah station might hold answers felt increasingly futile. What good were scientific records if the very Earth itself was being consumed? We continued deeper into the tunnel, Maya now leading, her shotgun ready, Silas keeping watch behind. The air grew heavier, the silence more oppressive. Every drip of water, every scrape of rock sounded like a lurking threat. The fungal growths on the walls were thicker here, forming intricate pulsing patterns. The mine was becoming a living organism. Then the tunnel widened. It opened into a vast, cavernous space, far larger than I expected. The air here was strangely still, completely silent. Silas's flashlight beam danced across the cavern walls, revealing a horrifying, magnificent sight. Massive, intricate structures of intertwined tendrils, some as thick as ancient tree trunks, rose from the cavern floor, reaching towards the unseen ceiling. They pulsed with a faint, steady bioluminescence, casting the entire cavern in an eerie, shifting green light. It was a cathedral of horror, the ultimate expression of the tentacle evolution in its natural, unhindered environment. And in the center of the cavern, embedded within the largest of these tendril structures, was a colossal, pulsating black mass. It was easily 50 feet across, a perfect sphere of obsidian-like material, intertwined with smaller, constantly twitching tendrils. It pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, like the heart of some monstrous alien god. And from its surface, hundreds, perhaps thousands of tiny black spores were constantly being released into the cavern air, shimmering in the green light, drifting upwards. "The source," I whispered, my voice thick with a horrifying reverence. "The primary spore generator. This is where it all began, or where it's being amplified." This was the absolute, undeniable proof. This was the moment. Humanity witnessed tentacle evolution at its absolute zenith, its most terrifying, unadulterated form. Suddenly, a new sound. Not a moan, not a chitter. A high-pitched, almost crystalline hum emanating from the central pulsating sphere. It was not mechanical, it was biological, and it was growing louder. "What is that?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, my scientific knowledge failing me completely. "It's a form of communication, or a signal." The cavern began to shake, subtly at first, then more violently. The colossal tendril structures around the central sphere pulsed faster, brighter. And then, from the surface of the giant black sphere, cracks began to appear. Not ruptures, but deliberate openings, like eyes slowly opening in a monstrous face. From within these openings, smaller, whip-like tendrils emerged, hundreds of them, all pulsing with an intense, sickly green light. They stretched out, probing the cavern air, twitching, sensing. And then, as one, they turned towards us. The humming intensified, becoming a piercing shriek that threatened to deafen us. The ground beneath our feet began to violently, and from the various crevices and tunnels leading into the cavern, we heard it. The slithering, the moaning, the chittering. Hundreds of them, thousands, all drawn by the central sphere's signal, all converging on this one terrifying location. "We need to go," Silas yelled, his voice barely audible over the growing din. "Now! It's waking up!" But where? We were in the heart of the beast, surrounded by its manifestations, trapped in its cathedral of horror. The central sphere was glowing with an unbearable intensity, its newly emerged tendrils lashing out, testing the air, preparing. and as the first of the tentacled infected spilled into the cavern, their eyes glowing with the reflected green light, their tendrils writhing, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we were witnessing the final, terrifying birth of the tentacle evolution. And civilization completely collapsed was merely the prelude to an even greater, more horrifying cosmic transformation. We were standing at the precipice of a new alien world, and we were its last, desperate, unwilling witnesses.
The central sphere in the cavern pulsed with a blinding, sickly green light, its newly emerged tendrils lashing out, tracing patterns in the spore-filled air. The high-pitched hum intensified, becoming a piercing shriek that rattled the very bedrock of the mine. The cavern floor vibrated beneath our feet, threatening to throw us off balance. From every tunnel and crevice, the infected poured in, hundreds of them, thousands. The tunnel excavating miners, their tendrils glowing, their pickaxes scraping. The fast, multi-tendrilled hunters from the forest, their chitinous limbs scuttling over rocks. Bloated fungo sacs, their bodies distended, trailing slime. A grotesque, living tide of the tentacle evolution, all drawn to the source, to the heart of the nest. "We're surrounded!" Maya screamed, her shotgun booming, dropping one of the encroaching miners, but more immediately took its place. Silas fired his pistol, the muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the swarm of horrors. His face was a mask of grim determination, but his eyes held the raw, animal fear of a man facing the impossible. "We can't fight them all!" I yelled, my voice hoarse from the spores and the scream. My spear felt useless against the sheer numbers. The central sphere began to crack further, not breaking, but expanding, its black obsidian surface stretching, undulating. The hum deepened, becoming a resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate in my chest, a primal beat that resonated with my very cells. It was calling. It was growing. It's adapting, I realized, my mycologist brain, despite the terror, trying to make sense of the new horror. It's not just a spore generator, it's an incubator, a chrysalis. From the expanding cracks, new forms began to emerge. Not just infected humans or animals, but pure constructs of the tentacle evolution. Smaller than the massive guardian construct we'd seen in the forest, but sleek, agile, with multiple razor-sharp tendrils. They moved with terrifying speed, like grotesque organic spiders, scuttling over the larger tendril structures, converging on us. These were its offspring, its true form. "We need to get to the main structure," I shouted, pointing to the colossal cathedral-like tendril formation that housed the central sphere. "Climb! Get to higher ground!" It was a desperate, probably suicidal plan, but staying on the cavern floor meant certain death. Silas and Maya didn't hesitate. We began to scramble, climbing over the intertwined tendrils, their surfaces slick and strangely warm. The glowing growths pulsed around us, making the climb treacherous. Below, the horde surged, their moans and chittering deafening, their tendrils reaching, grasping. One of the newly born constructs, a sleek, 8-limbed horror, scuttled up the tendril structure impossibly fast. It lunged at Maya, its tendrils extended like daggers. Maya spun, firing her shotgun point blank. The blast tore through its head, sending a spray of black fluid, but it still managed to rake her arm with a tendril before it fell, its movements twitching for a moment before going still. "Maya!" Silas cried, reaching for her. Her arm was bleeding, a dark, viscous fluid oozing from the deep gashes. "I'm fine," she gasped, clutching her arm, her face pale. "Keep climbing." But her eyes betrayed the fear. A tendril wound was a death sentence. We all knew it. We pushed higher, scrambling over the grotesque, pulsating tendrils, driven by the relentless pursuit below. The constructs were climbing too, faster than the infected. They were designed for this environment. We reached a ledge, a temporary respite from the immediate horde. Below us, the cavern floor was a sea of writhing, moaning bodies. The central sphere was now fully exposed, its surface pulsating, its tendrils lashing out, not just at us, but at the very cavern walls, expanding its reach, claiming the space.
The tentacle evolution was actively reshaping its environment, not just infecting, but transforming the physical world itself. The humming intensified. The sphere began to glow with a blinding white light. I shielded my eyes. And then, from its expanding surface, a single, impossibly thick tendril began to emerge. It was unlike any other, massive, resonating with an otherworldly power. It grew upwards, slowly, majestically towards the cavern ceiling. It was not just a tendril, it was a primary anchor, a central nervous column, the core of a new, colossal organism. "It's growing," I screamed, the words lost in the rising cacophony. "It's going to breach the surface." If this thing reached the surface, if it integrated with the larger nest above, the entire continent, perhaps the world, would be consumed. This was the ultimate stage of the tentacle evolution, the moment the parasite became the planet. Silas, seeing the horror, the futility, turned to Maya, who was now clutching her injured arm, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Maya," he said, his voice raw, "I'm sorry. No time for apologies," she interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. She looked at the approaching constructs, at the colossal tendril rising from the sphere. "We need to stop it." "How?" I asked, desperation in my voice. "It's too big, too powerful." "The core," she said, her eyes fixed on the pulsating sphere. "There has to be a weakness, a vulnerability in its growth cycle, the moment of its birth." I looked at the spear in my hand, then at the glowing, pulsating heart of the nightmare.
It was an impossible target, surrounded by thousands of infected, guarded by its newly birthed constructs. And even if we reached it, what could a single spear do against a monstrous, evolving god? But Maya was right. It was our only chance, our only hope to fight back against the complete collapse of humanity witnessed before it was swallowed whole. "We create a diversion," I said, a grim plan forming in my mind. "We draw them away, and someone makes a run for it. Someone goes for the core." Silas looked at me, then at Maya, at her injured arm. He knew what I was suggesting. He knew it was a suicide mission. "I'll go," Maya said, her voice firm. "My arm is already compromised. I'm faster. I'll take a shotgun." She looked at me. "You understand this thing, Professor. Tell me where to hit it. Its weak point." I looked at the rising, colossal tendril, at the pulsating sphere. My mycologist's eye, honed by years of studying extremophile fungi, searched for a flaw, a vulnerability, a point of access. And then I saw it, a faint tether line, almost imperceptible, where the colossal tendril was merging with the main sphere. A growth seam, a point of active, intense cellular division, a weak point, a place where a desperate blow might make a difference. "The nexus point," I said, pointing, "where the tendril meets the sphere. It's the point of most intense growth. It'll be a concentrated node of its nervous system, its Achilles heel." Maya nodded, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Good enough for me." She glanced at Silas, then at me. "Thank you, both of you, for giving me a fight." Then, without another word, she loaded her shotgun, her injured arm trembling but her resolve unwavering, and jumped from the ledge, plunging into the teeming horde below. The tentacle evolution had claimed so much, taken so many. But Maya, a single, defiant human, was about to teach it that humanity witnessed its monstrous birth, and even in its last moments, it would fight. Her shotgun boomed, echoing through the cavern as she charged, drawing the attention of the horde, creating a desperate, fleeting window for Silas and me to plan. She was a sacrifice, a warrior, giving her life for a chance. And in that terrifying final moment, as the colossal tendril from the central sphere continued to rise, breaching the cavern ceiling, pushing its way towards the surface world, I knew with a chilling certainty that this was the most important and most terrifying moment of the new world. What happened next would determine if civilization completely collapsed forever, or if a desperate, tiny spark of hope could still be found in the heart of the tentacle evolution. And I, Eris Thorne, a mycologist armed with a spear and a desperate hope, was about to witness it all.